welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and ReadersMagnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, ReadersMagnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank ReadersMagnet and everybody that's involved. I love ReadersMagnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hi there. My name is Chet Shupe, and I've written, this is my book. The title is Rediscovering the Wisdom of Human Nature, How Civilization Destroys Happiness. Now, this is my second talk, and I don't know how many were there for my first, but I'll give you a short synopsis on how this book came about. I'm an electronics engineer by profession, retired now, but for a good part of my life, I suffered from severe attention deficit disorder. And at the age of 43, I was given Ritalin. And for the first time in my life, life made sense. Up until then, it had been largely a story of surrealistic horrors. And so I started writing on brain dysfunction to provide a conceptual framework for medically treating the brain. So the miracle that happened to me might happen to other people. Well, it turns out my background is in electronics engineering. I'm well-versed with system control theory. And as I started writing about the brain, I wanted to figure out what the brain's purpose was and how it was organized so that it could serve its purpose. And it wasn't long before my subject changed from brain dysfunction to cultural dysfunction, because I've come to believe that 95% of the problems humans have with addiction, drug overuse, suicide, depression, emotional illness is not because there's that many of us are defective people. It's because we're living in a world that emotionally we can't comprehend. So we have to use our intellect to survive instead of being true to our feelings. And when you can't be true to your feelings, you're going to suffer. The reason you can't be true to your feelings doesn't matter. You're going to suffer. Well, as a way, I'm going to let the computer read the introduction to my book as a way to get you on board about some sense of its scope. And as you're listening, take notes, think of questions. You can even be the devil's advocate. And then we'll have some time to talk about it after the afterwards. Okay, so let me get this set up.
Feel.
Oh, sorry. This is all kind of new to me, so bear with me.
Introduction. For the purposes of this book, there are only 2 chapters in the story of mankind. The first chapter unfolded like everything else in the natural world that defined the behavioral and physical nature of the evolving human species. That was the environment in which Homo sapiens appeared, took hold, then flourished, at one with nature. These ancestral pre-humans and humans survived on the land in small groups intimately connected by the already ingrained human need for the feelings of safety and belonging provided by the presence of others. One of the more potent of evolution's special gifts to humanity, our gift of language, made possible the second chapter in the life of our species. Before language, both humans and animals had always lived in the ever-changing moment, focused on what is, and on the immediate future. After language, humans developed an unnatural relationship with the future, focusing on the long-term future, even eternity. Once able to talk about the future, people quite naturally began to worry about it. They became afraid of it, afraid of what would happen, afraid they wouldn't be safe in a future yet unknown. Inevitably, they began to use language to create ways to guarantee safety in the future. They learned to make plans, then to organize and carry them out. Thinking they had control of their fate, they began living for the future. Ever since then, mankind has focused on what should be, not on what is. Those ancient people had no way to know they were unwittingly making a world-changing error, by flirting with the concept of the future. They had no idea that every generation after them would suffer, because of it. It felt so natural, at the time. There was nothing to stop them, or the generations that followed, from carrying that line of thinking to the nth degree. The result is the modern world in which we live, a world quite separated from the natural world that once cradled humanity. We now live in a world of technology, comforts, and excess, in which we see our possibilities as limited only by our imaginations. We even envision ourselves one day inhabiting the far reaches of the universe. We remain as unwitting as our ancestors, even as we suffer the moving catastrophe they unknowingly unleashed upon our species. In the course of this drastic change, our chapter 2 has turned into the story of how we lost our connection to our human nature, the emotional and spiritual core that makes us human. Born into this Teflon world of physical and material comforts that wealth provides, virtually none of us realized that, before chapter 2, human life thrived, because it was replete with spiritual wealth, the inherent, indispensable, comfort that is missing in our world, today. It is the comfort that comes from the love that automatically forms, when people depend on each other, for survival. Just as friction makes fire, interdependence breeds the deeply threaded love of sisterhoods and brotherhoods, the spiritual wealth that satisfies the hunger of our souls. Modern humans have lived without this key human comfort, for thousands of years, now, and many of us are beginning to perceive that something is wrong, something that is making our lives increasingly difficult. Nearly all of us are aware, some chronically, of our personal anxieties about the future, guilt about the conduct of our lives, resentment over any number of lacks, injustices, real or imagined slights, boredom, hopelessness, intermittent depression. All of it. At the bottom of that pile of modern woes lies the emotional isolation that causes it all, the lack of love, lack of real intimacy with others, the lack of freedom to express how we really feel, the necessity of repressing our real desires. All of this we tolerate in our modern world, which demands only compliance, never valuing us as the beings that we are. Modern life is not fit for humans. Modern life, in fact, is a desert for the soul. For thousands of years, humankind has been stranded in this desert, yet the mothballed soul of every human has remained intact. That is the reason I believe there is a way for us, once again, to feel and behave as the natural humans we are. This book has been written to break the impasse, and end the human blindness to the suffering that institutional life inflicts upon us all. Understanding that the way out of the desert is a way to be, not a set of goals or plans, is all it takes to start the process. Once we understand, we can hear our soul's message, again, a message that, once heard, cannot be stilled. Beneath the umbrella of that understanding, people will gravitate together, drawn by an irrepressible hankering for the intimate, interdependent lives all humans once took for granted. That's how we'll find the people with whom to make real homes, again. Though our lifetimes aren't long enough for us to see humankind's complete return to the natural human way of life, rest assured the process will not cease, once started. Too many people will understand, by then, that no human can enjoy spiritual wealth, nor can any species long survive, if its members are spiritually imprisoned by force of man-made laws that deny them access to their innate emotional intelligence. Darwin discovered that we descended from social primates, but that has traditionally been interpreted as applying only to our physical nature. I am saying that it applies to our emotional nature, as well. Indeed, only by being true to our emotional nature can we find contentment. Each chapter in this book takes a different perspective, in addressing the consequences of having to deny how we really feel, in order to comply with culturally imposed directives. The coronavirus pandemic came upon us after the original edition of this book had gone to press, but I was able to add the following coda: The Coronavirus Crisis, a lesson on spiritual connection, discusses how our reactions to crises, particularly this one, shed spiritual light on the nature of our circumstances. This second edition of Rediscovering the Wisdom of Human Nature contains changes throughout the book. The most significant change is the addition of 3 essays near the end. Written 2.5 years after the original edition was published, they re-examine the book's thesis from 3 different perspectives. To familiarize yourself with what the book is about, you might want to read them early on, particularly the final one, Why We Humans No Longer Love One Another. The table entitled Comparing Realities brings the entire thesis of this book into sharp focus, in a very concise format that's easy to read. Each row covers a different category of human needs, and shows how they fare in natural human life versus modern institutional life. The glossary clarifies my usage of terms. Finally, a brief, but comprehensive statement of what this book is about can be found in the slide presentation at the end, which is entitled How Would Human Life Organize Itself, if People Were Free to Be True to How They Feel?
Okay, that was the introduction to the book, and if any of you have any questions or comments, I would appreciate it. On the one I did on Monday, the deal showing the comments from the audience. Okay. Here I got a comment from Ethan Lee. Insightful and incisive. The book invites us to reflect about how civilization alienates us from one another, despite the rise of technology and communication that is supposed to connect us. Well, yes. You see, back when people lived in the natural world, back before there were any rules and laws, We form social groups, or I call them survival units, or spiritual homes, however you want to do it, by body language. There was no, the only thing those people had to guide them was their feelings. No one had any designs on the future 10 or 20 years from now. And when you're living in a state of intimacy where you're dependent on each other to survive, then all the information that enables you to survive the natural world comes through your feelings: anger, love, acceptance, rejection, the desire to sacrifice your life for others, the desire to kill others. Yes, that's part of it too. Sometimes for the species to be protected, killing is necessary. And certainly natural people had conflicts over territory. So we're not talking about some world in which there were no hardships. Hardship, that's why we need each other, because there's hardships. Our emotions evolved to celebrate life by overcoming hardships as a body of people. We can't celebrate life by overcoming hardships as an individual. See, that's the situation civilization puts us in. We're all alone with a monetary and property to survive. So we're out here all alone overcoming hardships. There's no celebration there. But if you're with a band of brothers and sisters, then, well, with nothing to overcome, there would be nothing to celebrate. Well, I've taken that quite a ways. So I do want to say that on the previous ones, apparently I found out afterward there was a lot of people who liked what I was doing, and that makes me feel good, because I've spent about 40 years working on this to try to learn what I think I see well enough to where I can communicate it to other people. And if people like what I'm doing, that's a sign that it's possibly being communicated. I know there was one person that asked, well, perhaps our only problem is that the species hasn't adapted to civilization. And well, that's always a possibility. Anything's a possibility. Life on this planet indicates that species are able to adapt to virtually anything. But there is an issue: they can't adapt real fast. If the environment changes quickly, that causes species extinctions. And of course, when humans went from trusting their feelings, taking care of each other because they loved taking care of each other, that's what their feelings rewarded them for, was taking care of each other. And I'm sure that all of you can relate to this, because surely there's been a time when you have been there for another person or some other people when they really needed you. And I think if you reflect back on how that made you feel, you wasn't concerned at that time. You weren't concerned about what life's about. You knew. And that's probably one of the highest experiences in your life, is how you felt. Well, that's the way humans evolved to live 24/7. But here we are, instead of depending on brothers and sisters to survive in the natural world, we are dependent on property, money to survive as an individual. And that causes social isolation. And it's very hard for the member of any social species. I don't care if you're talking about elephants, lions, chimpanzees, baboons. It's very hard for the member of any social species to find contentment when they're alone. Because when you're alone, you've got no spiritual obligations. For social species, see, our whole lives used to be governed by taking care of our spiritual obligations, which is what our feelings told us to do, to feel good. Now we live in a world in which we survive by taking care of legal obligations. Well, can you imagine how that affects our brain? Here we are, millions of years of pre-human and human evolution, through which we took joy, contentment in taking care of the people around us. Now we got no one to take care of. Okay, I got a comment here from Charles L. Sargent. Read Sins of Henry County. Well, I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not sure what Charles is referring to there. But I will say some things about sin. See, we were born to take care of life by being true to how we feel. And that includes feelings of romance, for example. We live in a world in which we have to make lifetime commitments in order to have a family. And so, a good many times when we experience romance, we can't be true to how we feel. And that hurts. I mean, here we've got a wife and children who we respect, we admire, we care about, we've made commitments to, and they're depending on us being true to these commitments. And so we have to be true to those commitments instead of to how we feel. And that's just an example of the suffering that results from being institutionally subjugated. Now, if the romance is one of the strongest connections that people feel, it exists to, it's our species sensibilities about genetic selection. So it has nothing to do with lifetime bonding. It's about procreation. So it doesn't last very long. Well, how long does it take to ensure procreation? 2 or 3 months? Well, anyhow, so sometimes that comes to people so powerful that we can blame them if we want to, but you got to be there to understand what they're going through, that they're actually not true to their legal obligations. And we call that sin. Well, we spend 90% of our lives as institutional, because of institutional subjugation, in various ways of denying how we feel to realize this future that we're being promised if we follow all the rules. And romance is just a particularly powerful example, but we end up living in other words, all the feelings through which we want to take care of the life of our species get referred to as sin. And so, matter of fact, the major religions of the world say that we're born in sin. Well, this, I'm saying that we were born to take care of the life of our species. And because we wanted to control our futures, control our fate, we've had to outlaw the feelings through which we would take care of the species. And we deal with the pain when you have to deny who you are to physically survive or be accepted by the culture. You're in pain. And so the culture says, well, you're sinful. You've sinned, or you're thinking about sin. That's why you're in pain. It's not because you want to be true to life, because a civilized culture doesn't even know that our instincts exist. They represent the wisdom of that has been accumulating since the first stirrings of life on earth, so that we could take care of life. But of our innocent desire, and I say innocent because there's no evil there, there's no bad intentions. It's just that we were given language, and when you can talk about the future, sure enough, your brain's going to emote feelings that says you want to control your future. And with language, you can create laws and things and do that. But unfortunately, that outlaws your purpose. I got a question here. Ray Haven. Hi, Chet. How vital is it having to bond with your brothers and sisters in this modern civilization world? Since you talked about brotherhood and sisterhood on your website. Well, I'm just saying that to have any spiritual obligations, that means obligations that come from our soul. The only way you can fulfill those obligations is through interdependent relationships. And when I say interdependent relationships, I'm talking about a body of people who are taking care of each other without any record keeping. Our emotions can manage intimate relationships to as many as 40 or 50 people. And that is how our emotions evolved to celebrate life. Well, if you don't have those 40 or 50 people, or if they're around there and they're all following rules instead of paying attention to how they really feel, you have no brothers and sisters. So basically, the issue is trying to figure out. I'm not talking about people going out and living on the land, at least not tomorrow. But we have to understand what a personal bank account and personal property, how that destroys even the possibility for brother and sisters. So the issue is how, and I talk about in the book, I see the time must be getting pretty near the end. And I just want to say that if you want a free copy of my book as my payment to you for spending this time listening to me, you go to my website and at the end of the address, put a /intro, INTRO. And with that, there's a free download of the book there for you to read. And I really appreciate your attention. If you do read the book and, well, whatever you think, if you like it or don't like it, I would appreciate you putting a review on Amazon. And be sure that you put the review at the second edition of the book. I've got about 60 or 70 reviews on the first edition, and you can find that on Amazon. You can look at those reviews, but there's none for the second edition yet because I just put it out. But if you want to put a review, that would be a big help. And that would go for all the storytellers, not just me. I don't see, when I did this Monday, there was a deal that said how many minutes are left, but I don't see that right now. So I'm not sure. Well, anyhow, brotherhood and sisterhood is, there we go. 5 minutes. Okay. Well, let me address that deal of brotherhood and sisterhood. You know, when there's a documentary, Restrepo, it's about I talk about this in my book, but it's about a remote military outpost in Afghanistan. And a couple of guys, reporters, went there and lived with those guys for 2 or 3 months. And those guys knew brotherhood because, first of all, their economic and social status didn't matter out there. It didn't matter how much money you had or how much education or anything. You were all in this situation together, and you're dependent on each other to survive. Well, they end up calling that, they were there for 13 months. And they ended up calling that place a Man Eden, because they knew what love was. They knew what intimacy was. And it comes through interdependence. You don't have to have war for it, but you do have to be depending on each other to survive. Whether it's in the middle of the plains or the middle of the ocean or anywhere, that is where our emotional connections come from. In other words, you don't love people by intent. You love them because you need them. And if you tell them you love them, but you don't need them, you are pretending love. And one thing that caused a lot of suffering in this modern world is that we have manifest reasons to tell people tell people that we love them when we don't really need them. That results in a lot of suffering. And when these soldiers come home from war, a lot of them kill themselves. Why? Well, they've seen some pretty terrible things at war. And certainly they have that in their brains to manage. But they come from a place of unconditional love to a place where no one cares about you except whether you got money or not. And what's the point in living? In other words, they had an experience in which the question of why am I here was the most remote thing in their mind because they had brothers to take care of. Boy, when you have that, you don't need anything else. But if you don't have brothers and sisters to take care of in some dimension, and particularly to help each other survive, then you can only pretend love. And that's, I said, how civilization destroys happiness. It destroys interdependence. And so we either experience no love at all, or we can only pretend it. Not because we're evil, not because we don't need love, not because we aren't vulnerable. It's just we live in a world in which success is to prove you're not vulnerable. Success is to prove you don't need anyone. And now there was another message came up that I didn't get to see because I was talking. Can we bring that other one back up? Ethan Lee, I think Mr. Shupe should continue sharing his ideas about civilization for they offer relevant opinions and commentaries. A remarkable work. Well, thank you, Ethan. You know, for the 40 years that I've been working on this thing, my biggest fear was that I would die. It's very hard to communicate the things I'm trying to communicate. But my biggest fear was that I would pass on without anyone having any clue of what I think I've discovered. Now, whether I've really discovered anything is for other people to decide, not me. I obviously feel like I have, or I wouldn't be writing about it. But just because I think I know something doesn't mean I do. That's for the readers to figure out. But when I get comments like that, then I'm going to be able to go peacefully, because at least my experience for whatever it's worth, won't be wasted. I really think that we are in pain. We're destroying the habitat. None of us want to. That's not because we want to destroy the habitat. We just simply find ourselves trapped in a situation in which to physically survive, we have to participate in the destruction. And there's no one to be blamed for that. No matter what happens, even if our species goes extinct because of living in denial of our real wisdom, that's no one is at fault for that. Because you put any living organism in a situation in which they're told what they have to do to survive, they will do it. And it doesn't matter what the consequences are. We just need to find a situation in which we can survive by being true to what nature made us instead of being true to what the state is trying to make us. And then we can again celebrate in the process of life on this earth, something we haven't done for 3,000 to 4,000 years. I'm running down to the final minutes here. Let me say that I will have another session on Friday. And I think what I'll do there again is read some from the book. I think I've chosen the first part of chapter 1 to give you a little more depth into where this whole thing is going. But regardless of how distressing it might be to come to believe that civilization may in fact not work at all, there is a silver lining, because we humans, if we were being true to ourselves in our relationships with the people around us, instead of being true to our bank accounts, we would be radically different. We would behave radically differently. And through that behavior, we would discover unconditional love, lasting unconditional love. Because that's what we're here for, to take care of one another. It's not to go to the moon. Going to the moon's exciting, but we're not here to inhabit the universe. We're here to take care of life. We're here to take care of what brought us here, life. That makes sense, surely. And the only real contentment and rewards we get from life is from doing what we were put here for, to take care of life, not personal accomplishments. Well, thank you so much. And it's been nice talking to you, and I enjoyed the comments. And nature, I equate nature with God. In other words, nature created us, forces of nature. So nature bless you all. Thank you.